busy morning of news here for Boeing.
Boeing 737 MAX planes with defective rudders.
A warning has just been issued about some Boeing planes with functions that could jam during flight.
Boeing has tried to remove videos like this, not just once, but multiple times. Boeing does not want you to know what is happening behind the glamorous facade. Not only is it considered a serial killer due to catastrophic crashes, Boeing is also accused of being involved in war and human rights violations. And if given the chance, they would probably take down this video of ours to erase all traces. But the truth always comes to light in the end. Do not look away, because the final secret may make you never see Boeing the same way again. A Boeing 787 Dreamliner crash has just occurred in India. Videos capturing the catastrophic moments have started to spread rapidly, leaving Boeing unable to react in time. Instead of being transparent, they chose their usual approach, quietly attempting to erase all the videos from social media. But these are not ordinary clips. One of them captured the final seconds inside the cockpit, where one can clearly hear the pilot's last words and desperate screams, just hours after going viral. The accounts that posted them were taken down one by one, and a series of legal warnings were issued, using familiar reasons like copyright infringement or causing public panic. Everyone understands. Boeing is afraid that public opinion will dig deeper, that the media will criticize them, and the top of America status they have spent 109 years building will once again sink into scandal, lawsuits, and chaos. And if you are watching this video, understand that they also want to erase the truth being exposed here. Why are they so afraid? Because what is happening behind Boeing's giant facade is far more horrifying and darker than what the public has been told. Human rights violations, direct involvement in major wars. Who would have thought that Boeing is one of the corporations involved in modern wars and directly linked to allegations of human rights violations? In the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, Boeing was the main supplier for the U.S. Air Force, especially with the B-52 strategic bombers. It was Boeing's B-52 bombers that carried out devastating bombing raids during the Shock and Awe campaign. The U.S. preemptive strike on Baghdad in 2003, which killed thousands of civilians and leveled many residential areas. In the Republic of Yemen, where one of the worst humanitarian crises of the 21st century is taking place, JDAM smart bombs have been continuously used by Saudi Arabia in attacks. The peak of this tragedy was the 2018 attack on a school bus in Dayan, Sada province, which immediately killed 40 children. After an investigation by human rights organizations, the bomb was confirmed to be a KC-82 bomb, guided by laser and convertible into a smart bomb, for which Boeing is the primary manufacturer. It did not stop there. Boeing has also sold lethal weapons to a wide range of countries, including Saudi Arabia, F-15SA, JDAM, UAE, India, Israel, and many others. Among these, many Boeing weapons were accused of being used to suppress civilians. For example, the F-15SA fighter jet produced by Boeing appeared in air raids that caused large casualties. But more horrifying, the targets were not only military but also schools, markets, hospitals, residential areas, and even weddings. The international community was horrified and continuously criticized Boeing in the media, arguing that the company is profiting from bloody conflicts. Protests have taken place outside Boeing's factories, and politicians have called on governments and organizations to sever ties with the corporation. Despite facing many pieces of evidence from international organizations, Boeing has never officially acknowledged responsibility, nor has it ever faced any significant legal consequences. Boeing has been extremely successful in covering up scandals. This is believed to be thanks to a hidden network of political power that Boeing has quietly built over many decades, spending tens of millions of dollars to meddle in politics. Boeing does not stop at manufacturing aircraft. It also deeply interferes in American politics. Every year, Boeing spends tens of millions of dollars on lobbying activities in the U.S. Congress, with the goal of ensuring that the defense budget continues to rise, weapon contracts continue to pour in, and unfavorable policies are redirected before they even take shape. From the Pentagon to the National Security Council, Boeing people have appeared in powerful positions. And when they leave office, many go to Boeing and become advisors and policymakers, bringing with them classified information and relationships to serve the corporation. This exchange between the government and Boeing has created a power spiral. Lawmakers become lobbyists. Former regulators become the regulated. Approvers become negotiators. This is especially evident in investigations involving Boeing, such as the 737 MAX case. When Boeing was under investigation for deadly technical failures, many U.S. lawmakers who had received donations from Boeing spoke out in defense of the company, even blaming media exaggeration or pilot error. Meanwhile, the FAA, the agency responsible for overseeing flight safety, was criticized for being lax, evasive, and weak in the face of Boeing and its lobbyists. Multiple pieces of evidence show that Boeing was once authorized to self-inspect by the FAA during the 737 MAX safety certification process, prompting both Democratic and Republican lawmakers to simultaneously question the FAA's oversight role. Is the government allowing the wolf to inspect the chicken coop? According to many sources, because of Boeing's excessive contributions to the U.S. government. The company was given special priority during product approval processes, despite serious safety concerns, and it was the passengers on those flights who paid the price. But the cost was not only paid in the sky, on the ground. Inside the very factories where Boeing aircraft are assembled, strange illnesses began to appear, accompanied by symptoms no one could explain. Strange illnesses while working at Boeing. Dean, 45 years old, was a quality control employee at Spirit Aerosystems, the fuselage supplier for the Boeing 737 MAX line. He was the first to expose serious assembly errors, mistakes that could cause an entire aircraft to fall from the sky. After reporting them, he was fired in April 2023. Dean had a healthy lifestyle, loved sports, and had no history of serious illness. But just a few weeks after contracting a regular case of influenza B, his condition suddenly worsened, leading to acute pneumonia and then multiple organ failure. He was airlifted from Wichita to Oklahoma, placed on ECMO, deeply sedated, and underwent continuous dialysis. Doctors had even prepared to amputate both arms and legs to save his life, but it was too late. Dean took his last breath on May 2nd. But Dean's death was too strange, and he was not the only one. Smith and Pruitt, two former employees who had worked at Boeing, also described unusual symptoms during their time in the factory: prolonged coughing, severe headaches, unexplained shortness of breath. All tests returned inconclusive results until they discovered toxic mold, industrial chemicals, and residual toxic gases present in the air where they had worked. Doctors confirmed these substances are fully capable of causing chronic pneumonia, neurological decline, and long-term respiratory damage. This is no coincidence, because at Boeing's Everett plant, dozens of employees had previously complained about exposure to hexavalent chromium, cleaning solvents, and highly corrosive substances in an environment with no ventilation. They experienced dizziness, headaches, and some were diagnosed with symptoms related to lung cancer. But instead of improving working conditions, Boeing remained silent, and worse, many internal medical reports were ignored. "We were like lab rats," a former employee said, forced to work in a toxic environment without being given proper protective equipment. How could the largest aerospace company in the United States, with millions of dollars in revenue, operate in such a hazardous environment? The painful answer lies right within Boeing. Production efficiency is always prioritized over human lives. In its financial statements, Boeing is willing to treat employees like Dean as an acceptable cost. Even, according to Pruitt, There was a time when an internal investigation team from Boeing was sent to inspect a supplier company that had defective parts. As a result, the president of that company bluntly threatened to use force if the team continued probing, but no one at Boeing spoke up. When threats of violence are ignored, when workers walk into the factory but leave with a body that no longer feels like their own, people begin to whisper that perhaps Boeing is not just a manufacturing corporation, but something far more dangerous, dubbed the deadliest corporate criminal in U.S. history. Boeing has been labeled as the deadliest corporate criminal, according to a blunt statement by Judge Reed O'Connor. It is not by chance that Boeing received such a heavy title. The number of deaths linked to aircraft produced by Boeing is shockingly high. According to data from the Aviation Safety Network, between 1990 and 2020, Boeing was responsible for nearly twice the number of fatalities compared to Airbus, its main rival in the commercial aviation industry. As of the end of 2023, the Boeing 737 series had recorded 529 accidents, 215 total aircraft losses, 5,779 fatalities. On average, each Boeing 737 has caused about 27 deaths due to serious incidents, a terrifying figure for a commercial aircraft line. Most recently, on June 12, 2025, the world was shocked by the Air India Flight 171 disaster. The Boeing 7878 Dreamliner crashed just minutes after takeoff, taking the lives of all 241 people on board and 19 on the ground. A total of 260 people died in less than a minute. After two consecutive fatal crashes involving the Boeing 737 MAX in 2018 and 2019, the phrase "Boeing kills and walks away" began to spread widely, especially following an investigative article by the New York Times. This reflected the public's outrage and disappointment over Boeing's safety issues. Judge O'Connor did not hesitate to criticize Boeing. He demanded that the Department of Justice, DOJ, and Boeing be transparent in selecting independent monitors and clarify the integrity of those monitors. But ultimately, all efforts were in vain, because the power and influence of this aerospace giant are simply too great. And if even a federal judge cannot shake the system, then safety warnings are merely a formality. And the same thing happens with test cockpits, where everything is just a trick to deceive investigators. Test cockpits only for show, even turned into storage rooms. According to an audit report from the U.S. Senate, Boeing's internal quality control system has serious flaws. Many employees were instructed to self-inspect the very parts they had just assembled. The carelessness did not stop there. Many test cockpits, originally designed to simulate rigorous flight operation procedures, had become storage spaces for components, leftover materials, and even personal belongings of employees. According to auditors, they discovered all sorts of forgotten items in the simulated cockpits, from toys and keys to folding ladders. One of these facilities was intended to simulate flight cabins for emergency response training, but in reality, it had lost its intended function and was not properly monitored. Only after the door blowout incident on a Boeing 737 MAX in early 2024 did the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, officially step in and order a comprehensive review of all test facilities. The results stunned many. Seemingly harmless objects like ballpoint pens, screws, plastic pieces, or even loose wires were found scattered next to control circuit boards, potentially causing short circuits, disrupting electronic signals, or accidentally triggering critical sensors during emergencies. An engineer who had worked on site could not hide his disappointment. We were asked to simulate emergency situations, while the simulator was sitting next to a pile of cardboard boxes and old wire rolls. Isn't that ridiculous? And it didn't stop there. When even training became a joke in a storage room, Boeing went on to do something even more terrifying with the pilots, using tricks to prevent pilots from receiving proper training. Throughout investigations into aircraft accidents, investigators uncovered signs that Boeing deliberately outsmarted regulatory agencies. Specifically, Boeing failed to fully disclose cockpit features to pilots, including the emergency cockpit door release mechanism in case of cabin depressurization, a situation that could affect the ability to control the aircraft and the safety of the flight crew. Within the FAA, the phrase Jedi mind trick was once leaked, referring to the sophisticated loophole tactics Boeing used to convince the FAA that pilot training was unnecessary. Pilot Emily Whiprud of Alaska Airlines was one of those placed in such a dangerous situation during a flight. The cabin door unexpectedly blew open mid-air. After landing safely and conducting a post-flight check, she discovered that the system was not mentioned in any training materials, and pilots had never been informed of the possibility. With such a minor omission, a tragedy could have easily occurred, but it didn't stop there. In the two disasters of Lion Air 610 and Ethiopian Airlines 302, Boeing intentionally concealed information about the MCAS system, an automated control mechanism that played a central role in the chain reaction that caused the planes to crash. In addition, the AOA Disagree Alert, a signal indicating abnormal angle of attack sensor behavior, was also excluded from the mandatory pilot training programs. All of this was done to avoid the cost of additional training, and more importantly, to maintain a competitive edge against Airbus by promoting that 737 MAX pilots don't need retraining. But the price of this minimal training was paid with 189 lives in Indonesia, 157 people in Ethiopia, and a generation of pilots placed in the cockpit without knowing what they were doing. For any other company, such tragedies would be enough to drag them to court. But for Boeing, it was only the beginning of a larger game, where power and connections were used as a shield to erase all legal consequences. The tactic of using power and money to avoid prosecution. In 2024, the U.S. Department of Justice, DOJ, officially accused Boeing of conspiracy to defraud the Federal Aviation Administration over the MCAS control system, a key factor in two catastrophic crashes that killed 346 people in 2018 and 2019. For any other company, this could have been a criminal case, but not for Boeing. Instead of being convicted, Boeing reached a secret deal with the DOJ. They only had to pay a total of $1.1 billion, including fines, compensation, and costs for improving safety systems, in exchange for the right to avoid criminal prosecution. This agreement was signed in May 2025 and allowed Boeing to completely dodge criminal charges, as long as they complied with a few voluntary monitoring conditions in the future. They didn't even have to undergo strict independent supervision, only needing to hire a compliance consultant of their own choosing, a move that many legal experts criticized as an internal inspection farce. In response to this decision, many families of the victims simultaneously spoke out in protest, calling the deal a slap in the face of justice. They killed my child, and now they just write a check and get away with it? Worse still, throughout the entire agreement, from the press to legal documents, Boeing was never once referred to as a criminal. They paid the money, hired lawyers, used political connections, and walked away from the investigation table quickly without ever facing a criminal sentence. And perhaps, because no one dares to call the crime by its real name, Boeing keeps sinking deeper, willing to do even more horrifying things just to keep the production line from ever slowing down, willing to forge documents to cover up component defects. According to exclusive documents obtained by Reuters, Boeing continuously pressured production lines, forcing workers to work overtime and speed up output, regardless of whether the aircraft being built was actually safe. So the result was a nightmare. Misaligned bolts, loose screws, critical parts forgotten, exactly like assembling a cheap toy. Not massive machines carrying hundreds of lives suspended in the sky. Roy Irvin, a former quality investigator at Boeing, once bluntly stated that the company was filled with indifferent employees turning a blind eye, and warned that many serious issues might still be hidden. Never exposed, Sam Salahpour, another veteran engineer, also issued a warning: the older the aircraft models, the greater the risk, because the company reused old parts to cut costs. The clearest evidence was the terrifying mid-air door blowout on an Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9 in early 2024. The investigation revealed that the door plug latches had never been properly fastened since the plane left the factory. Even worse, investigative documents showed that contractors like Spirit Aerosystems were once instructed to delete records, forge inspection documents to conceal production defects. When CBS News uncovered the incident, Boeing didn't deny it, but simply responded coldly that the quality team will fix it after receiving the parts, as if human lives were something that could just be patched once the aircraft was already in the sky. When forging records, covering up violations, and disregarding lives become an informal process turned into standard practice, a larger question begins to emerge. Is the public now afraid of Boeing? Public reaction to the jaunt? The public is growing increasingly anxious and fearful in the face of Boeing's successive aviation accidents, which have caused an enormous number of casualties. However, this fear does not come solely from the tragedies and loss of life. It comes from the fact that people no longer know what to believe in. No one denies that aviation accidents can happen to any aircraft manufacturer. But what makes Boeing a haunting presence is that each disaster carries too much pain. Boeing was once a symbol of American technology, a source of pride in engineering, safety, and superior standards in the aviation industry. Yet now, the company is branded as the most dangerous corporate criminal in modern history. A flood of allegations, from fraud and hiding technical flaws to political manipulation, has completely shattered Boeing's image in the eyes of the public. That once solid trust has collapsed. A 2023 YouGov survey in the U.S. made it clear. 36% of passengers admitted they were inclined to avoid flying on the Boeing 737 MAX. They don't need to be aerospace engineers, don't need to understand MTS systems or missing bolts. They simply no longer trust. And the next time you board a Boeing aircraft, will you truly feel safe, or will you be praying to the heavens that tragedy won't strike? If you found this story meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any upcoming videos.